Hey guys, what's up? My name is Bharat, you're watching iGyan, and today we're going to be reviewing the 2020 iMac. But before we get started, I want to tell you that the first iMac that I ever used was a iMac G5, and since then it has been difficult for me to go back to Windows. But the story of my first ever self-purchased iMac started in 2012 when this thin design iMac came out, and we've been editing on iMacs ever since then. In fact, if you watched any of our previous videos, you know that we have a lot of iMacs in our studio and our office. In this video, we're going to be reviewing the new 2020 iMac and see where we've reached in 2020. Let's get started. We want to take a moment and thank all of you guys for being a part of Team iGyan, and I want to congratulate Adnan and thank him for being a part of Team iGyan. We'll be sending you some merch and a pair of wireless earbuds as well. If you guys would like to win some merch or other goodies from iGyan, leave a comment and subscribe to iGyan. Now, the biggest problem that has been for us has been the fact that you couldn't customize iMacs here in India, and I always had to go overseas, customize an iMac with higher specifications, with more graphics, with a higher processor, and then either carry it back to India or import it to India, and that had always been an issue. Funnily enough, finally Apple has launched the Apple Store in India and also customization capability in India, so you can go on their website, customize your iMac to your heart's content, and then buy it. One issue that I do have is some of the add-ons are extremely pricey compared to what they are priced at overseas. So for an example, the nano texture display, which is an option on the new 2020 iMacs, is $500 in the US, but in India it's 50,000 rupees. So there is a 1 to 100 conversion as far as the dollar is concerned, and that is something that Apple could have avoided with their own store now being in play. They could have offered better prices to make iMacs more acceptable and more accessible to consumers here in India. Consumers who tend to usually go the build your own PC route would have preferred to buy an iMac if the prices would have sort of mellowed down a little, but they haven't. But that is a different aspect. The fact that you can now customize saves you the process of going overseas or importing it from overseas, and it definitely makes it a more worthwhile option for somebody who's considering a fully loaded Mac. Now, last year we checked out the 2019 iMac and it had a Core i9 processor. This one has a Core i7 processor, but this is the 10th generation Intel processor and it has 8 cores. We'll talk about the performance and all of those things later. What I want to talk about now is the design of the iMac. Since 2012, the design of the iMac hasn't really changed. In fact, if you go back to 2012, this design was really modern for its time. It was not seen anywhere. The slimness of the bezels, which now look massive, the thickness of the overall shell, which now still looks kind of slim and modern for what it's worth. Most monitors are thicker than what an iMac is, but that also goes to the fact that these are not very serviceable. The one thing that is serviceable on the iMac is the RAM, and we did swap out the 8GB that we had initially with 64GB RAM, and it's as easy as opening the back door, removing the old DIMMs and installing your own new DIMMs. In fact, Apple says that you can install any brand of RAM as long as it's in the range of their megahertz, which is 2667 megahertz. Of course, you can get 2666 RAM, which is more readily available, and it works just fine on the iMac. We'll leave the links to the ones that we installed on our iMac in the description below in case anyone is interested. So now we have the iMac up to 64GB. It has a Core i7 and it also has a Radeon 5500 XT Pro graphics, which comes as default on the i7 model. You can upgrade this machine to the Core i9 as well as 5700 XT Pro graphics, which again is an add-on option. Like I said, you can now get up to 8TB of solid state drive on your iMac, and if you're somebody who's going to be doing video editing on your iMac, I would seriously consider getting it because of the speeds that you get and onboard storage. You don't need any external drives to do video editing, and that will definitely be a really good add-on to get on an iMac if you're somebody who does video editing. So another thing that hasn't changed in a while are the ports. So you still get the standard ports. You get a SD card reader, which is now faster than last year's. You also get a headphone combi jack along with 4 USB 3.1 ports and 2 Thunderbolt ports, which are also USB Type-C compatible. You also get gigabit Ethernet, which you can upgrade this year to 10 gigabit Ethernet. So if you're somebody who does have 10 gigabit Ethernet set up in their office or home, you can take advantage of that at the time of purchase and install a 10 gigabit Ethernet directly on your iMac. Another thing that Apple has upgraded this year without changing the design in any way are the speakers, the inbuilt microphones, and the FaceTime camera. Now, the FaceTime camera has been pretty good for many years, and in fact, the one major upgrade that I saw with the FaceTime camera was on the iMac Pro, which I personally use for the past couple of years, and they put in basically the same FaceTime HD camera onto the new iMacs. So now you can do full HD video calling, and the microphones are multi-array microphones that will capture audio and then also cancel out the noise from your background. So if you're doing video calls, then you can use the inbuilt microphones, and they work as good as dedicated microphones on a headset. The noise cancellation is fantastic, and it cuts down background noises without any problems, and it makes you sound professional when you're doing video calls directly from this as well, which again, if you're somebody who does that kind of work, will come in handy. In fact, we've seen samples and demos of people recording music directly on the iMac, and trust me, I was amazed to hear the quality of this microphone and the speakers looking at and listening to some of those samples. Now, one of the major reasons that people choose Apple computers over Windows computers is, I think, the operating system. If you get used to Mac OS and the simplicity behind it, you sort of don't want to go back to the complexity of Windows. And there's nothing wrong with Windows. It serves a purpose. It's one of the most consumed operating systems. But for more creative work, iMacs and Apple computers have mostly dominated, and that's because of the simplicity and the ease of use and the combination of an ecosystem, a word that gets thrown out a lot when we are doing Apple videos, but the ecosystem in which you can transfer files from your phone to your Mac and put them in the cloud where they're readily available on the Mac without needing to install third-party software makes this a preferred option for creative types. And the combination of the software, things like Final Cut for video editing, things like Logic Pro for music editing, all of those features combined make the iMac a really good creative content creation machine. And that is what Apple is intending for it. If you're somebody who works in the professional space, if you're a businessman who doesn't do any creative work, this looks great on your desk. You can place it there. You don't have additional wires. You don't have a CPU hanging out somewhere. You don't have cables running from your monitor. You don't need to look for keyboards. Everything comes as a package. Everything is simple. There's a single wire going to the iMac and it looks great. So you can get the base model. You can do your spreadsheets. You can do all of those things. But if you're somebody who's creative, you get a very power-packed machine. You get a suite of software that mostly is free, and some of it is very, very cheap compared to if you look at Pro Tools available for Windows. And then you will see that the software works really well on Mac OS, and that is why this has become the choice of people, and this is why it is also shown in pop culture as the choice for creatives, because mostly creatives do prefer working on iMacs. Of course, there are exceptions. I'm not generalizing. I'm saying a general choice option for most YouTubers, you will find they will be editing on iMacs or MacBooks, and that is because of the fact that the software suite works really well with the hardware that Apple makes. Now, I wanted to see what difference we get in terms of performance from the previous generation iMac to now the last possible generation of the iMac. And I'll tell you why I'm saying last in just a minute, but let's talk about performance. So we wanted to compare a few machines. We did have a iMac from 2015, which is a first generation iMac 5K display. And then we also have the iMac Pro, which I've been using for the past couple of years, which is a 2017 edition bought in 2018 iMac. Now that has an 18 core processor. We also wanted to see the performance of last year's iMac, which is iMac 2019, which does have the Core i9 processor, and this year's 2020 iMac, which has the Core i7 processor. So there's quite a lot of variation as far as processors are concerned. There's quite a lot of variation as far as RAM is concerned. All of them have different levels of RAM, and all of them have different graphics as well. So we'll leave all the specifications for all the machines on your screen right now so that you can go through some of the specifications, as they vary quite a lot with respect to RAM, graphics, and processor. But despite all of that, you will see that this iMac really performs well. So we ran Geekbench as a benchmark on all of these machines. So you'll see that the iMac 2015 gave a score of 1039 on single core, which is still respectable with respect to 2020 standards. And then the multi-core score is where it sort of falters, and that's because of only 4 cores in the CPU, and that gives a score of 4339 on the multi-core score. My iMac Pro, which has an 18-core processor, gives a single core score of 1158, but because it has 18 cores, it really pushes in the multi-core performance, and it gives a score of 14,230. The iMac 2019, which does have a much more modern Core i9, gives a single core performance of 1351, but a multi-core performance of 7537. And finally, the 2020 iMac does lose out on the single core performance with respect to 2019, gives a score of 1276, beating both the 2015 and the 2017 by a considerable amount, and then gives a multi-core score of 9078. We also wanted to run a benchmark of video exports, which is something that we use iMacs for more than often. And with the iMac, we set up a export of 1 minute without any major edits, and we want to see if it can edit real time, which is what the benchmark for video editing for us is anyway. So on the iMac 2015, it took 1 minute 20 seconds to render this 1 minute 4K video, and on the iMac Pro 2017, which is the 18 core variant, it took us 1 minute 11 seconds to render this 4K 60 FPS 1 minute video. On the iMac 2019, it took 1 minute 16 seconds to render this 1 minute 4K 60 FPS video. And finally, on the iMac 2020, defeating all the other 3 iMacs, it took us 1 minute and 8 seconds to export this video. So it does outperform all the machines, including the iMac Pro, as far as exports are concerned and render times, and that's because of the combination of the CPU as well as the GPU on this machine. So we get a really good performance from the new 2020 iMacs. Now, Apple is supposedly going to launch a new generation of the iMac, which will come with Apple Silicon, and there's been lots of rumors and talk about there being a new iMac with a new chip and a new design. Apple will get rid of the bottom bezel, the side bezels, the top bezels, and give you a more iPad-like look for the iMac, which is what is expected, and that might happen, but it will not happen for the flagship variant. I feel that Apple will launch Apple Silicon-based machines, but they will be more fanless machines for budget consumption, for the spreadsheet user, for the web browsing user, for the businessman who wants to put it on his desk and doesn't want to care about what it performs like. That will be the Apple Silicon-based iMac that will come out first. Apple will take about a year to come out with professional machines that can replace Core i7s and Core i9s. And if you're in the market on the edge thinking whether or not you should buy this, I think you should just pull the plug and start creating your content, which is what is more important, rather than waiting for a year. If you do have the liberty to wait for a year and you want to wait for the year for the latest hardware, you should, because in most likelihood, Apple will launch a refreshed iMac with a new design, with a new processor, with possibly a new structure on the inside that will possibly offer better thermals and better performance out of the box. But that is at least a year from now. That's it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to smash the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're not already a part of Team iGyan. This has been Bharat. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one.